The restaurant was a symbol of wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables adorned with fine silverware and pristine white tablecloths. The hum of conversation mixed with the faint clinking of glasses as waiters glided through the room, serving plates of steak and seafood to some of the wealthiest elites in New York. At one of the largest tables near the center, a group of Wall Street executives and liberal elites sat comfortably, discussing stock market trends, global trade deals, and the latest political developments. Among them was Nathan Holloway, a well-known investment banker with strong liberal views and open disdain for conservatives. He swirled the deep red wine in his glass before leaning into his colleagues. "It's amazing, isn't it?" he said with a smirk. "These so-called hard-working Americans love to praise capitalism until they realize it doesn't work in their favor." The group chuckled in agreement. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the restaurant, a man hesitated. He looked out of place. His clothes were neat, but well worn, his shoulders slightly hunched. He wasn't here to enjoy a five-star meal. He was here because he had no other options left. The maître d' at the front desk raised a judgmental eyebrow. "Sir, do you have a reservation?" The man took a shaky breath. "No, but I heard that Mr. Holloway sometimes offers financial advice. I just need 5 minutes of his time." The maître d' barely concealed his annoyance. "Sir, this is an exclusive establishment." Before he could dismiss him completely, Nathan Holloway turned his head. He had heard everything. A slow smirk spread across his face. He set his wine glass down with deliberate precision and loudly cleared his throat to get the attention of his dinner companions. "Oh, this is priceless," he chuckled. Another hard-working conservative, coming to beg from the same system he spent his whole life defending. The man's face flushed with embarrassment. I'm not begging," he stammered. "I just need." Nathan waved his hand dismissively. "Of course you're not. You're just standing in a place you can't afford, hoping someone richer than you throws you a bone. Typical Republican logic. You people fight so hard against social safety nets, but the moment things get tough, you suddenly want help." His friends at the table laughed. The man clenched his fists, but before he could respond, Nathan leaned forward, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Let me guess, you voted for Marco Rubio, didn't you?" He smirked. "Oh, I love this part." The bootstrap conservatives suddenly realizing that bootstraps don't pay the bills. The man looked down, gripping his coat as if he wanted to disappear. Nathan's smirk grew wider. "I mean, hey, maybe Donald Trump will help you out. I hear he has a golden toilet. Maybe he can spare some change for one of his loyal little Republicans." Laughter erupted from the table. The humiliation was unbearable. The man turned to leave, his face burning with shame. But just as he took a step toward the door, a strong, steady voice rang out behind him. "That's funny. You talk a big game about fairness, yet you sit here and humiliate a man who's just trying to survive." The restaurant fell silent. Nathan Holloway's smirk froze. His colleagues stopped laughing. The man turned back around, his eyes widening in shock. Standing just a few feet away, Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, had been watching the entire exchange. His expression was calm but razor-sharp, his eyes locked onto Nathan's. And he wasn't about to walk away. The room was silent. The air, once filled with laughter and the clinking of expensive wine glasses, now felt thick with tension. The waiters had stopped in their tracks. The restaurant guests, most of them wealthy elites, slowly turned their heads toward the confrontation. Nathan Holloway leaned back in his chair, his smirk slowly returning. He recognized Marco Rubio immediately. "Oh, wow," Nathan said, raising an eyebrow. "Look who decided to bless us with his presence. Marco Rubio, the great defender of the working man." His voice dripped with mockery, and a few of his dinner guests chuckled, encouraged by his confidence. Rubio didn't move. His expression remained calm. But the way he looked at Nathan, like he had already won this exchange before it had even started, made the banker's smirk flicker for just a moment. The struggling father standing nearby still looked humiliated, ashamed, frozen in place. Rubio turned his gaze toward him. "Are you okay?" His voice was even, steady. The man hesitated, clearly not used to being acknowledged in places like this. I just needed help, but I should go." Nathan laughed softly. "Yes, listen to Rubio. Be a good little Republican and help yourself instead of running to the government like a socialist." More chuckles from his table. A few other guests, silent until now, muttered in agreement, but Rubio wasn't taking the bait. He looked at Nathan with a small knowing smirk of his own. "You talk a lot about self-reliance," Rubio said, crossing his arms. "That's interesting, coming from someone who made their fortune off government bailouts and tax loopholes." Nathan's smirk vanished. Rubio continued. "In fact, wasn't it your bank that got a multi-million-dollar bailout during the last financial crisis? But when a struggling father asks for help, you laugh in his face." The chuckles at Nathan's table stopped. Some guests exchanged glances. A few waiters pretending to polish glasses were now openly listening. Nathan sat up straighter, his jaw tightening. "That's different," he scoffed. "We needed those funds to keep the economy stable. People like him just don't know how to manage their money." Rubio raised an eyebrow. "People like him?" Nathan rolled his eyes. "Come on, Mr. Secretary. You and I both know that the average conservative voter complains about big government, but runs straight to it the moment life gets tough. It's hypocrisy, just like you." Rubio let out a small laugh. "Hypocrisy?" He gestured toward the restaurant. "You're sitting in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, lecturing a man who probably works harder in 1 week than you have in your entire life." Nathan's face darkened. The father lowered his head, but Rubio turned toward him. "You work long hours, right?" The man nodded. 60 hours a week, no vacations. "Just trying to keep my son in school." Rubio turned back to Nathan. "And you think he's the problem?" Nathan's smirk had completely disappeared. His face was turning red. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, especially not in public. "I think," Nathan said, gripping his wine glass, "that conservatives like you play the family values card. But when it comes down to it, you'd rather see people like him fail than actually help them." Rubio's expression hardened. "I am helping him," he said, stepping forward. "I'm standing up for him right now while you're sitting there in your $1,000 suit, blaming him for your own failures." The tension spiked. Nathan slammed his glass down. "You Republicans are all the same. You worship Donald Trump, you whine about the elites, and you push your fake Christian values while letting the poor starve. Maybe if your party actually did something for the working class, instead of obsessing over your ridiculous culture wars, people wouldn't have to beg for help." Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Some guests looked genuinely uncomfortable now. Rubio didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in slightly, his voice cool but sharp as a knife. "The difference between you and me, Nathan?" he said. "I believe in lifting people up. You believe in keeping them down." Nathan glared, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. It wasn't Rubio. It wasn't Nathan. It was the struggling father. And he was done staying silent. For the first time that night, Nathan Holloway wasn't the center of attention. All eyes were now on the struggling father. He took a deep breath, his hands still shaking slightly, but there was no more hesitation in his voice. Nathan's jaw tightened. His fingers curled around the edge of the table. Rubio watched closely. He knew what was coming next. The father didn't stop. His voice rose not in anger, but in sheer, exhausted frustration. "You say people like me run to the government when things get tough?" He let out a bitter laugh. "That's funny. Because when your bank screwed over the entire economy, who bailed you out?" A few gasps rippled through the restaurant. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Nathan's face twitched. He opened his mouth to speak, but the father wasn't finished. You want to talk about hypocrisy? He asked. You liberals pretend to fight for the little guy, but you're the first ones to look down on us. A heavy silence filled the room. Nathan forced out a smirk. Oh, please, he scoffed. Spare me the sob story. The father shook his head. You know what's crazy? He asked. I used to be a Democrat. I used to believe people like you actually cared about guys like me. Rubio nodded slightly. He'd heard this before too many times. But then I saw the truth, the father continued. Liberals love talking about helping the poor, as long as it means we stay dependent. The moment we stand up, the moment we work hard and want a better life, you laugh at us. Nathan's eyes darkened. Rubio could see it, the moment liberal arrogance turned into pure contempt. Nathan scoffed, shaking his head. You're a fool, he said coldly. And so is everyone who thinks like you. Rubio stepped forward. And that's why you'll never understand America, he said. Nathan whipped his head around. Excuse me? Rubio's voice was calm but firm. You think success belongs to the elites, he said. That power should stay in the hands of a few. You mock conservatives for believing in hard work, in faith, in family. But the truth is, we don't need your approval. Nathan gritted his teeth. His knuckles were white against the table. Tell me something, Nathan, Rubio continued, his voice sharp. If America is so unfair to the working class, then why do millions of immigrants, including my own family, come here and build a life? Why do they work 2, 3 jobs just for a shot at the American dream? Nathan scoffed. Because they don't know any better. Rubio smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. No, he said, shaking his head. Because they know exactly what America is. The land of opportunity, not a land of handouts. A few guests murmured in agreement. Others remained dead silent. Nathan was losing control. He knew it. And that's when the real meltdown began. Nathan Holloway's face was bright red. He was no longer the smug, untouchable Wall Street elite sitting comfortably among his peers. No, now he was angry, cornered, exposed. And he did what every liberal does when they start losing an argument. He lashed out. Oh, give me a break, Rubio, Nathan sneered, leaning forward. You sit here preaching about hard work like you're some kind of self-made man. You're just another Republican puppet, riding Trump's coattails to power. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. A few of Nathan's friends shifted uncomfortably at how personal the attack had become. Rubio's expression didn't change, not even a blink. Nathan smirked, taking his silence as a sign of weakness. What's the matter, Mr. Secretary? Afraid to admit you're nothing without Trump? Still, Rubio said nothing. Nathan, now fully convinced he had regained control, leaned back in his chair and laughed. You conservatives love talking about family values and hard work, but you know what your party really stands for. Hatred. Greed, division, he scoffed. Trump, DeSantis, Cruz, you're all the same. You play the victim while stacking the deck against everyone who doesn't look like you. Rubio finally tilted his head slightly. Stacking the deck? He repeated. Nathan nodded. Yes, stacking the deck. Against minorities, against women, against immigrants. Your whole party is built on keeping people like me rich and keeping everyone else struggling. A low chuckle escaped Rubio's lips. It wasn't forced. It wasn't defensive. It was the laugh of a man who had just been handed an easy victory. He took a step forward, his eyes locked onto Nathan like a hawk staring down its prey. Nathan, Rubio said smoothly, do you know where my parents worked when they first came to this country? Nathan opened his mouth, but Rubio cut him off. They were immigrants from Cuba, Rubio continued. My father was a bartender. My mother was a maid. They didn't have money. They didn't have connections. They had nothing. Silence. Rubio's voice remained calm but firm. And yet, in one generation, their son became a United States Senator, then Secretary of State, now one of the most powerful men in the country. Nathan's smirk was gone. Rubio shook his head. But according to you, America's is rigged against people like me. Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Rubio leaned in slightly. Tell me something, Nathan. If America's so unfair, so oppressive, so rigged, then why did my family and millions like them come here and build a better life? Why do so many people risk everything just to be part of this country? Nathan had no answer. The restaurant was dead silent. Nathan gritted his teeth. His entire face was burning with rage. He was losing. And he knew it. That's when he did the one thing every liberal does when they lose a debate. He snapped. You know what, Rubio? Nathan growled, pushing his chair back violently. I'm sick of your party. I'm sick of you people playing the victim while pushing your disgusting, outdated values on the rest of us. Waiters took a nervous step back. You stand there like some kind of hero, defending a guy who's probably never voted in his life. Nathan jabbed a finger toward the struggling father. Meanwhile, people like me create jobs. We drive the economy, and you want to paint me as the bad guy? The father's fists clenched. Rubio didn't flinch, not once. Nathan shook his head, his voice now shaking with anger. People like you, like Trump, like DeSantis, you are what's wrong with this country. And then, he said the one thing he should have never said. He pointed directly at Rubio and snarled. You people should know your place. The entire restaurant gasped. Even some of Nathan's own friends looked horrified. The struggling father froze. His jaw clenched so tightly that it looked like he might snap. And Rubio? For the first time that night, he smiled. Because Nathan Holloway had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just gone off. You people should know your place. The entire restaurant fell into a stunned silence. Even the clinking of silverware and hushed whispers had stopped. Nathan Holloway, still fuming with arrogance and rage, leaned back in his chair. He truly believed he had the upper hand. But Rubio wasn't done. He took a step closer, his eyes locked onto Nathan's, and for the first time all evening, his voice carried a quiet, dangerous intensity. Know my place? Rubio repeated, tilting his head slightly. Tell me, Nathan. Where exactly is my place? Nathan opened his mouth, but Rubio didn't let him answer. My place, he continued, his voice calm but razor-sharp. My place was in a small house with 2 immigrant parents who worked until their hands were raw so I could have a better future. Nathan's smirk flickered. My place, Rubio said, stepping even closer, was watching my father clean tables in a hotel while rich men like you laughed about how easy the American dream is. A few guests nodded subtly. Others simply stared, enraptured. Rubio's voice grew stronger. My place was earning my future. I didn't inherit millions. I didn't get bailed out by the government when I failed. I worked. I sacrificed. And I didn't have to sell my soul to do it. Nathan gripped his wineglass tighter. Rubio shook his head. And now, after all that, after everything my family fought for, after everything millions of Americans like me fight for, you sit here, in your designer suit, in a restaurant most people could never afford, and tell me I should know my place? Nathan had nothing to say. Rubio didn't break eye contact. His voice was steady, unwavering. The entire room was hanging onto every word. My place, Nathan, he said, is standing right here, looking you in the eye and telling you that you're wrong. Nathan scoffed. He reached for his wine, took a sip, and forced out a nervous chuckle. This is ridiculous, he muttered. I don't need a lecture from a Republican grifter pretending to care about the working class. But before Rubio could respond, the struggling father stepped forward, and this time he wasn't nervous. Nathan, the man said, his voice stronger than before, you asked me earlier why I'm struggling, right? Why people like me can't get ahead. Nathan rolled his eyes. I didn't ask. I already knew the answer. The father nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. And I used to think the answer was people like Marco Rubio, people like Trump. I thought Republicans were the ones keeping me down. Nathan's smirk returned, but the father wasn't finished. "But now," he said, "I realize it's been people like you all along." Nathan's smirk disappeared. "People like you tell us we're too stupid to manage our own money. You tell us we're too weak to stand on our own. You tell us we need the government to save us. But the moment we work hard and try to make a better life, you laugh at our faces." More guests nodded. A few of Nathan's own colleagues shifted uncomfortably. The father exhaled sharply. "You're right about one thing, Nathan," he admitted. "I did vote Republican. Not because I think they're perfect, but because at least they don't look at people like me and see a lost cause." Nathan pushed back his chair aggressively. "This is a joke," he spat, his face burning with humiliation. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this nonsense." He turned toward his friends at the table. "Come on, let's go." But they didn't move. Some of them looked down at their plates. Others exchanged awkward glances. No one wanted to be seen leaving with him. Nathan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Seriously?" He scoffed. "You're just gonna sit there?" Silence. Then one of the waiters stepped forward. "Sir," he said carefully, "your check is ready." A few muffled chuckles came from nearby tables. Nathan's face twisted in rage. He slammed a few $100 bills on the table, turned on his heel, and stormed out of the restaurant. The moment the door swung shut behind him, the restaurant erupted in quiet murmurs. Rubio let out a small breath. He glanced toward the father, who was still standing there, looking somewhere between relieved and overwhelmed. Rubio reached into his pocket, pulled out his personal business card, and handed it to the man. "Go to my office tomorrow," he said. "We'll see what we can do." The man's eyes widened. I don't know what to say," Rubio smiled. "Then don't say anything. Just show up." The man took the card like it was made of gold. As the restaurant slowly returned to normal, one thing was undeniable. Nathan Holloway had walked in believing he was the smartest, richest, and most powerful man in the room. But when he walked out, he left with nothing. And Marco Rubio? He had just reminded everyone why real power doesn't come from money. It comes from standing for what's right. This story isn't just about politics, it's about standing up for what's right. Marco Rubio didn't back down, and neither should you. If you believe in hard work, integrity, and fighting for the American dream, make sure to subscribe right now. Let's keep these stories alive and make sure the truth is heard. And now, it's your turn. Do you think conservatives are treated unfairly in today's society? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're reading every single one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.